too much sun and the problem it's going to give your orchids. The reason I'm going to be chatting about this today is because even experienced growers have this problem too. We just set up all these new shelves in the back area to put on some of our orchids, and of course I didn't realize how much sun actually got here. I thought all the trees were going to shade it, so we've had to throw up the shade netting just to save them as a temporary measure. So let's look into why, or rather let's look into what the sun does to your orchids and how you can diagnose whether it's sunburn or something else. Welcome to the Nature Company. If this is the kind of information you're interested in, please hit that subscribe button down below and that notification bell to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. So how can we identify whether our poor orchid has been sunburnt or whether it's some other problem? Well, it's actually fairly simple. We just got to look at the angle at which the sun has been blasting onto our orchids and whether all the markings are on the same axis. Then we know it's from that sun beating down from that position, burning those points that are in direct line with those rays of the sun. So we can either get these whitish marks. This is generally how they start out, and they start browning in the middle, and then again we can see it all came in from this end, catching this corner, the center over here, and this edge. So we can see the sun had come in from a specific angle and just caught all of this. It's gone this icky green-brown color and starting to go black off. And here with this big girl, it's gone completely black down the edge of this corner leaf, this leaf, and this great big burn mark on this leaf. This leaf is quite thick, so this has actually gone a little bit squishy and papery. So there's this papery section here which generally happens with the sunburn. After a while it goes all papery and crisp and dries off, but with these thicker leaves you'll land up with this sogginess first, immediately afterwards, before it starts to dry up. This is just because what's happened is you've actually boiled the internal cells of the plant and the cell walls have just given up and gone soft. So you've just completely destroyed the structure inside the leaf. This, as it is not going to actually kill the plant unless of course your whole plant has been affected. But what it is going to do is going to cause permanent damage to the sections of the leaf that has been affected. The balance of the leaves that haven't been affected are going to be fine. They're not going to, the sunburn isn't going to spread, but you have to watch for secondary infections. Until the leaf is properly dried off, there can be secondary infections that occur in the dead areas of the cell before they dry out. So just keep an eye on that. If not too many of the leaves have been affected, you can remove the leaf completely if you prefer that for aesthetic reasons. But if you're not terribly worried about that aesthetics and you'd rather give the plant a better chance at recovering quicker, I'd rather leave that leaf on, and those parts of the leaf that haven't been affected can still produce all that food and nutrition to help sustain your plant through its recovery period. And just an early warning sign that your orchid may be getting a bit too much sun is this purple reddish discoloration. It's a protection mechanism, almost like a sunblock that it puts on, just warning you that it's starting to get too much exposure to light, and this doesn't harm it. It's only if you allow that further sun exposure to get to it that it can then start burning. And now you know what the problem with your orchids are when they start getting these black marks, and how do you then save them? Well, the first thing you got to do is move them to a shadier spot. Make sure that full sun isn't glaring down on them through a window, or if you've got them outdoors, just move them to a spot that's going to get shade for longer periods of the day. Also, a good idea is then to ensure that your humidity levels stay up so that they can recover more quickly. And in doing so, you can add a bit of mist to them, mist them down occasionally, just to keep those temperatures down so the leaves don't overheat again. Also, they're probably going to start needing higher levels of watering, as they're probably a little bit now dehydrated, and you're just going to have to try and balance your watering properly with them to ensure that they now get enough water to rehydrate all those parts that have been desiccated. Also, now that your plants have been slightly damaged, they're not feeling too well, it's going to be time to watch out for those pests. This is the point that the pests, those insects, like to get in and attack your plants because they're not healthy enough for them to fight it off themselves. So just keep an eye out for that. And of course, if you're not cutting off your leaves, watch out for secondary infections. So keep an eye on that to ensure that those parts that might have become mushy, especially with those thicker leaved cattleyas and things like that, that doesn't get infected. Ensure that it dries out completely and no fungal or bacterial infestation can occur in those dead parts of the leaf. And as I've said, leave as much of your leaf on as possible to allow for the balance of the leaf surface to continue to supply sustenance to your plant so it can help its recovery. And again, it's not only the leaves of your plant that are going to be affected by sunburn. It's the pseudobulbs can also be affected. The flowers, what happens with sunburn is they discolor quickly and they'll probably all be aborted. So something to watch out for. Also, sunburned orchids, generally you'll find that the flower spikes are weaker and the new flowers that open are going to be quite a bit smaller. So just something to watch out for as well. So you could always snip those flower spikes off to allow your plant to recover properly before it starts to push up all those flowers and use all the energy. Another thing that can happen, especially with Phalaenopsis, because often we keep them in those clear plastic pots, that sun can come straight through and burn the roots. Also with Cattleyas, it can burn roots that are on the outside of the pot or across the top of the pot. And then what then's going to start happening is you start getting yellowing leaves, you'll get desiccated pseudobulbs, and your plant just won't look very happy. It could very well be that your roots have been sunburnt. And the yellowing that happens on the leaves is because the chlorophyll has deteriorated. It has been destroyed by that heat and that direct sun action, and you land up with that icky yellow-green color. And so how do we prevent sunburn from happening in the first place? Well, we're obviously going to have to avoid that direct sunlight blaring onto our orchids. Of course, certain orchids prefer the full sun, but things like our Cattleyas are just going to burn up in it. So move them off into a shadier spot that's not going to get that full sun either through the window or out in your garden. And by keeping your humidity levels up and allowing for good circulation, this almost acts as an air conditioner for your plants. So that helps in keeping the temperatures in the leaves down and reduces the possibility of burning. So that's always a good thing to remember. Humidity levels and air circulation. Also, we've got to remember the seasonal changes in the sun and how that's going to affect the sunlight coming through to our orchids. As the sun is lower in the sky in winter, so it's able to get in deeper into the house or underneath those trees and onto our plants. And we've just got to make sure that we've taken this into consideration in our placement of our orchids. Of course, winter sun is going to be less damaging to your orchids than what the summer sun is going to be. So let's just keep that in mind. So another way to scorch your leaves is by having the leaves pressing up against a surface which is going to get hot by exposure to the sun. So if it's touching up against a metal surface or something similar that's being baked by the sun, and this is in the shade on the other side, it's still going to burn as that heat's going to be transferred through and into the leaf. Certain brick walls also do the same sort of thing. If they get the blaring sun on one side, often the back side of the wall can be almost too hot to touch, and that then too is going to scorch your leaf. So even with the sunburn, your plants should be fine. But understand also, it's not only direct sun and sunburn that's going to damage your plants, but heat stress itself. This can cause dehydration of your plants. Your plant isn't going to be able to absorb the water fast enough if you're not watering frequently enough to compensate for the transpiration that's taking place for the orchid to try and keep itself cool. Also, you'll get the yellowing as the chlorophyll again starts to deteriorate and the withering of the pseudobulbs. But as long as you're ensuring that high enough humidity with a good enough air movement, you can be that air conditioning action is going to help keep your orchid safe. This is not going to be a problem for the majority of homes, but just something to think of, especially in those locked sun-filled balconies. They can get extremely warm when no one's at home. So don't fret or panic if you have sunburn on your orchids. It's something that the orchid can rectify itself relatively easily. We just got to, as I said before, make sure we don't get any secondary infections. And watch out for those pests. And your plant should recover relatively quickly. The only problem is you may still have some ugly damaged spots on your plant, but in a couple of years those old leaves will be replaced by new ones. So it's not really a train smash. And thank you for watching. If you found any of this information helpful, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below and that notification bell, bing bong, to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing.